Hey everyone! Before we begin, please subscribe. Today, I'm sharing a true story from my real life, something I've never talked about before. Stay till the end because the ending changed everything for me. My name is Isabella Marie, and when I say I grew up without comfort, I don't mean I missed a few luxuries. I mean comfort didn't even know my address. Our home was a place where the walls had more cracks than laughter, and where the kitchen smelled like boiled water more often than real food. I learned early that hunger isn't just a feeling in the stomach, it's a fear in the chest, a constant whisper that says, "What if tomorrow is worse?" My clothes were hand-me-downs that never fit right, shoes that pinched until my toes felt like they were apologizing for existing, and school supplies that I guarded like treasure. I watched other kids open lunchboxes with sandwiches and fruit, and I pretended I wasn't looking because I didn't want pity to become my daily meal. At night, I'd hear my mother sigh like her lungs were tired of hoping, and my father's silence was its own kind of thunder. But here's the thing. Poor doesn't always mean loveless. Some nights when the power went out, we sat close in candlelight and told stories. My mother's voice became a blanket, and my father, when he did speak, would say small sentences that carried big meaning, like, "We keep going." Those words planted something in me, a stubborn seed of survival. I promised myself I would grow into someone who could buy bread without counting coins twice, someone who could say yes to warmth, yes to full plates, yes to rest. I studied hard, not because I enjoyed it, but because I saw it as a door. I worked odd jobs as a teenager, cleaning, sorting, helping wherever I could, because I hated the helpless feeling of waiting. Still, even while I was struggling, I had little happy moments that felt like sunlight sneaking through cracks. A neighbor once gave me a knitted scarf, and I wore it like it was a royal crown. I found a used book at a stall and read it so many times the pages softened like cloth. I laughed with friends on the walk home, pretending my stomach wasn't empty, because laughter was free, and I needed something that couldn't be taken away. But deep inside, a quiet decision was forming. One day, I would have enough. I didn't know yet that enough can be a dangerous word when you grow up with nothing, because sometimes, when you finally get a little, you don't know how to stop. Chapter 2. When I finally tasted more. In my early youth, I became a machine built from urgency. While others talked about dreams like they were soft, floating things, I treated my dream like a hammer. I worked in the mornings, studied in the evenings, and told myself sleep was optional. The first real job I got felt like proof that my life was changing. I still remember the smell of the office. Paper, coffee, clean floors, and how my hands shook when I received my first paycheck. I didn't even spend it a while. I held it, stared at the numbers, and cried in the bathroom because for the first time, I felt like my future was something I could touch. Slowly, I started upgrading my life one small piece at a time. A winter coat that actually warmed me, a decent meal that didn't come with guilt, a bed that didn't creak like it was complaining. And when I got my first promotion, I thought, this is it. This is the reward. But what nobody warns you about is that rewards can turn into cravings. When I had nothing, I imagined comfort as peace. When I finally had comfort, I started treating it like a contest. I didn't just want food, I wanted extra. I didn't just want new clothes, I wanted stacks of them, tags still on, folded like trophies. I started buying things not because I needed them, but because the act of buying made me feel safe, like I was building a wall against my childhood. I kept snacks in drawers, sweets in jars, and backup groceries, like a person preparing for a storm that only lived in her memory. At first, it looked harmless. My friends even laughed and called me prepared. But I wasn't preparing, I was collecting. The happiest moments were real, though. I took my mother to a restaurant and watched her carefully choose something from the menu like she couldn't believe she was allowed. I bought my father a warm jacket, and he stared at it silently, blinking too hard. I paid old bills that had haunted our family for years, and each cleared payment felt like breaking a chain. I started traveling a little, seeing clean streets and bright stores, tasting foods I had only seen on television. I told myself I deserved it because I had suffered, because I had earned it. And I did earn it. Every long shift, every sacrifice. But along with my money, another thing started growing. A loud pride. It wasn't confidence. It was sharper than that. It was the feeling that I could never go back to being small. So I kept pushing. More work, more buying, more eating, more everything, because more made me feel untouchable, and I didn't realize I was slowly becoming trapped by the very abundance I prayed for. My overeating didn't begin as greed, it began as comfort. I ate when I was tired, when I was stressed, when I was lonely, when I was celebrating. Food became my language for every emotion. A good day meant dessert. A bad day meant 2 dinners. If I felt anxious, I chewed until my thoughts sounded quieter. At first, it was almost funny to me, like, look at Isabella, the girl who once feared an empty plate, now living like a queen. But queens can fall too, especially when they ignore their bodies. I gained weight slowly, then suddenly. My favorite clothes stopped fitting, then my shoes felt tighter, then my knees started complaining each time I climbed stairs. I told myself it was normal. I told myself, you're just enjoying life. But enjoyment started turning into frustration. I'd wake up heavy, already tired, and still crave sugary comfort. I'd promise myself, today I'll be disciplined. And then one stressful email would send me running towards snacks like they were rescue boats. And the sleeping. Oh, the sleeping. Because I had worked so hard for so long, I began to treat rest like a reward I couldn't stop claiming. I started sleeping in late on weekends, then sleeping early, then napping just a little, until my life began shrinking into a cycle. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. The more I slept, the more my energy disappeared. The more my energy disappeared, the more I slept. I felt trapped inside my own soft habits, like being wrapped in a blanket that slowly turns into a net. Still, there were happy moments mixed in, because life is rarely only one color. I laughed with coworkers, bought gifts for family, hosted dinners where people praised my cooking, and I smiled proudly. I took photos in new outfits when they still fit, posted them like proof that I was thriving. But behind my smile was a secret fear. I wasn't controlling my life anymore. My health checkups became uncomfortable conversations, numbers went up, doctors suggested changes. I nodded politely and promised I'd do better, then drove home and stopped for takeout because I felt offended by reality. That's the strange thing. When you turn your struggle into your identity, you start rejecting anything that threatens it. I didn't want to admit that I had traded one type of pain for another. In childhood, pain came from lack. In adulthood, pain was coming from excess. And the worst part? Excess feels like your choice, so it becomes harder to forgive yourself. I started feeling frustrated with my own reflection, frustrated with my body, frustrated with my cravings. And instead of dealing with frustration properly, I ate it. I swallowed it whole. I kept earning and collecting and consuming like I was filling a hole that had no bottom. And while I was distracted by my own comforts, my heart started doing something else, something messier. It started looking for love, not in one place, but in many. People assume that when you become successful after a hard life, you become calm. I didn't. I became hungry in new ways. I wasn't just hungry for food and money. I became hungry for attention, validation, and proof that I mattered. My first relationship felt like a sweet rescue. He looked at me like I was impressive, like my ambition was beautiful. I loved that feeling. But I also tested it. I'd talk about my achievements too much, hoping he would admire me. When he didn't respond the way I wanted, I'd feel insulted. Like, after everything I've survived, how can you not be amazed? That relationship ended quietly, with two people realizing they were speaking different emotional languages. The second relationship was exciting, fast, full of compliments, and full of drama. I confused intensity for love because my nervous system had grown up in survival mode. Calm felt suspicious. When he left, I pretended I didn't care, but I ate my sadness and slept through my weekends. The third was stable and kind, but I ruined it with my pride. I kept score: who paid, who sacrificed, who gave more. I didn't know how to relax into partnership because I had trained myself to be a one-woman army. The fourth relationship was my biggest embarrassment. I tried to buy love with gifts, with fancy dates, with always saying yes. And when it didn't work, I felt foolish and angry at myself, like my money was supposed to protect me from rejection. Each breakup left a new scratch on my heart, and each scratch made me chase more again. More work, more food, more sleep, more shopping. My life looked full from the outside, but inside I felt strangely empty, like a pantry stuffed with food while the soul stays starving. Still, I had happy moments mixed in, because life is rarely only one color. I laughed with coworkers, bought gifts for family, hosted dinners where people praised my cooking and I smiled proudly. I took photos in new outfits when they still fit, posted them like proof that I was thriving. But behind my smile was a secret fear. I wasn't controlling my life anymore. My health checkups became uncomfortable conversations. Numbers went up. Doctors suggested changes. I nodded politely and promised I'd do better, then drove home and stopped for takeout because I felt offended by reality. That's the strange thing. When you turn your struggle into your identity, you start rejecting anything that threatens it. I didn't want to admit that I had traded one type of pain for another. In childhood, pain came from lack. In adulthood, pain was coming from excess. And the worst part? Excess feels like your choice, so it becomes harder to forgive yourself. I started feeling frustrated with my own reflection, frustrated with my body, frustrated with my cravings, and instead of dealing with frustration properly, I ate it. I swallowed it whole. I kept earning and collecting and consuming like I was filling a hole that had no bottom. And while I was distracted by my own comforts, my heart started doing something else. Something messier. It started looking for love, not in one place, but in many. I married him not because he promised me a perfect life, but because he offered me something I didn't understand at first: steadiness. In the beginning, I tried to impress him the way I had impressed others: expensive dinners, perfect outfits, a home decorated like a magazine. He smiled, appreciated it, but never acted like those things were the main point. One night, after a long day, I ate too much and complained about my body and my stress, expecting him to comfort me with soft lies. Instead, he said gently, "Isabella, you don't need more. You need peace." That sentence hit me like cold water. Peace? I had money, I had things, I had status. But peace felt like a language I had never studied. Marriage didn't magically fix my habits. If anything, it revealed them. I kept overeating and then feeling irritated when my clothes felt tight. I kept oversleeping and then feeling guilty when half my day disappeared. I kept overworking because earning made me feel powerful, and power made me feel safe. My husband started noticing how I'd swing between control and chaos. "You're so strong," he'd say, "but you're tired." Sometimes I'd snap back, "I'm fine." I wasn't. Still, our marriage had beautiful moments that softened me. We danced in the kitchen while dinner cooked. We took walks and talked about small dreams, gardens, quiet holidays, building a home that felt warm instead of expensive. When I got pregnant, I cried because the idea of children made my childhood memories rise like ghosts. I swore I would give my kids everything I never had: food, clothes, love, stability. And I did. at least in the ways I knew how. I prepared like a soldier preparing for battle. I bought everything in advance. I organized the nursery perfectly. I read parenting books like they were manuals for preventing pain. When my children were born, something changed in me. Happiness arrived in a new form, soft, needy, and real. Their tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I realized my life wasn't just about proving myself anymore. But old habits don't disappear just because a new love arrives. I still tried to fill every fear with excess. If my child coughed, I bought every medicine just in case. If a bill arrived, I worked extra hours just in case. If I felt stressed, I ate. If I felt overwhelmed, I slept. My husband tried to support me, but sometimes he looked at me like he was worried I was drowning in a pool I kept refilling. I wanted to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect success story, and perfection became its own addiction. I didn't realize that my children were watching, not just what I gave them, but how I lived. I wish I could tell you there was one dramatic moment that changed me, like a movie scene. But my turning point was quieter, and somehow that made it harder to ignore. It happened on a normal day. I woke up tired, even after sleeping too long. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the expression on my face. It wasn't just aging, it was heaviness, not in my body, but in my spirit. Later that day, I attended a school event for my child. Parents were clapping, smiling, taking photos. I was there physically, but my mind was elsewhere. Thinking about work emails, thinking about food, thinking about my schedule. After the event, my child asked, "Did you see what I did?" And I realized I hadn't. I had missed it, not because I was absent, but because I was distracted by the noise inside me. That night, my husband didn't scold me. He didn't lecture. He just said, "Isabella, I'm scared you're building a life where you have everything except yourself." I couldn't sleep after that. I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by things I had bought, achievements I had earned, and I felt empty in a way that no purchase could fix. I thought about my childhood, how I promised myself I'd never feel helpless again. Somehow, I had kept that promise in the wrong direction. I wasn't helpless anymore, but I wasn't free either. I was a prisoner of my own more. I started noticing how my habits were shaping my family. My kids were good, but they were also learning my restlessness. They were learning that comfort is something you collect, not something you cultivate. That realization hurt, but it also lit a fire in me, because pain, when used properly, can become wisdom. I began making small changes, not perfect changes. I started walking after dinner instead of collapsing into sleep. I started learning the difference between hunger and emotion. I reduced my work hours, even though it scared me, because I wanted to be present. I talked more, really talked, about my fears, my childhood, the way I still carried scarcity in my bones. My husband listened, and for the first time, I felt heard without needing to perform. My children noticed too. They saw me cooking lighter meals, choosing fruit over sweets sometimes, saying no to extra overtime. They saw me resting without escaping, like sitting with them, watching a movie, laughing, actually laughing. I wasn't cured overnight. I still had days where I wanted to binge on comfort, but I started building something new: moderation, balance. And in those small victories, happiness returned. Not the loud happiness of shopping bags and big paychecks, but the gentle happiness of being alive in my own life. I didn't know yet that the hardest test of my growth was coming, not in my own habits, but in my family's next generation. My son's divorce came like a storm that didn't just hit him, it shook all of us. I won't share private details because some pain deserves respect, but I will say this. I watched my child carry heartbreak with a face that tried to look strong, and it reminded me of myself. Suddenly, my grandchildren were in the middle of adult chaos, confused, angry, and hungry for stability. Their parents were trying, but life was messy, and the kids needed a steady place to land. So they landed with me. I became a grandmother who was also a second-time mother, and my home filled with noise again. Shoes by the door, toys on the floor, questions in the air. At first, I felt happy, even honored. I cooked for them, packed their lunches, helped with homework. I told myself, this time, I'll do it better. I tried to give them structure and warmth, but I also tried to protect them with more. More snacks, more gifts, more comfort. It was my old reflex. And for a while, it worked, at least on the surface. The kids smiled, they enjoyed the treats, but then came the phase that broke my heart. They changed. They started listening to people outside our home, friends who mocked kindness, voices that made bad behavior look cool, influences that turned respect into a joke. They became rude, careless, and distant. They talked back. They lied about small things. They wasted food, left messes, and acted like gratitude was embarrassing. I felt anger rise in me, and my old instincts returned. Control, frustration, overreaction. I wanted to fix it quickly, the way I used to fix everything, with force or excess. I wanted to punish hard, lecture long, buy their love back, or work myself into exhaustion trying to prove I could handle it. And then, one night after a tense day, I looked at them sleeping, 2 innocent faces under blankets, and I realized something important. They weren't bad kids. They were hurting kids. They were carrying the stress of divorce, the fear of instability, the confusion of split homes. Their behavior was a language. They were saying, "Are we safe?" That realization softened me. Instead of yelling, I started listening. I created routines they could trust. Dinner at the same time, bedtime stories, morning walks. I reduced the sugary comfort and replaced it with real connection. I started talking to them about feelings, not just rules. I shared parts of my own story. The girl who grew up with not enough, and the woman who almost drowned in too much. I didn't lecture like a judge. I spoke like a human. Slowly, they began to change. Not overnight, but little by little, they started apologizing, helping, opening up. Their eyes looked lighter. Their laughter returned. And I realized stability isn't a pile of things. Stability is a consistent love that doesn't panic. And for the first time, I felt like I was passing down a lesson I had earned the hard way. As my grandchildren improved, something else happened. I improved too. Caring for them forced me to live in a way that didn't leave room for my old excess. You can't oversleep when little feet are running around at sunrise. You can't overeat mindlessly when you're preparing balanced meals for growing children. You can't overwork every day when someone needs you to show up emotionally, not financially. I began to understand that my younger self had confused more with safety. But safety isn't built only with money. It's built with presence, with patience, with self-control. I started taking my health seriously, not with harsh punishment, but with gentle discipline. I walked with my grandchildren in the evenings. We played simple games in the living room. We cooked together and laughed when the cookies came out ugly. I taught them how to save money, but I also taught them how to enjoy life without buying it. We started a gratitude jar, where each night we wrote one good thing about the day. At first, they wrote silly things like pizza or no homework, but later it became deeper. Grandma listened. I felt calm. I didn't fight today. Those little papers became proof that the heart can heal when it's given a routine of kindness. My husband and I grew closer too. With time, he saw that I was changing for real, not acting, not performing, but genuinely learning moderation. I apologized to him for the years I spent chasing more while ignoring peace. He didn't hold it over my head. He simply said, "I'm glad you're here now." That sentence became a treasure I couldn't buy. There were still hard moments. My son struggled emotionally with the divorce, and I supported him, not by fixing everything, but by being steady. Some days my old urges returned, especially when I felt stress. The desire to eat too much, sleep too much, earn too much. Those habits still knocked on my door. but now I recognize them as old messengers, not bosses. I could say, "I hear you," without obeying. I learned to sit with discomfort instead of swallowing it. I learned to rest without escaping. I learned to work for purpose, not for pride. And in that reminder, happiness came back, slow and real. The most surprising part was realizing that joy doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. Joy can be a quiet cup of tea while the house is calm. Joy can be children doing homework at the table while you hum softly. Joy can be a body that feels lighter because your choices are kinder. I started to feel proud again, but it was a different kind of pride, not the sharp, bragging pride of money and status. It was the humble pride of growth, the pride of saying, "I used to be ruled by my past, but now I'm learning to lead my life." And when my grandchildren started showing kindness to others, helping a neighbor, sharing with a friend, I felt like my hardest years hadn't been wasted. They had turned into wisdom, and wisdom, unlike money, multiplies when you give it away. Today, when I look back, I see my life as two hungers fighting inside one heart. The first hunger was born from childhood scarcity, the hunger to survive, to have enough, to never feel small again. The second hunger was born from adult excess, the hunger to prove, to collect, to fill every fear with more. For years, I thought I was winning when my bank account grew, when my closets filled, when my table overflowed with food. But I was losing something quieter: my health, my presence, my peace. I learned that overeating doesn't only damage the body, it can also hide emotions that need to be faced. I learned that oversleeping can be a soft way of running away from life. I learned that over-earning can turn into arrogance, and arrogance can quietly poison relationships. I learned that love can't be purchased and loyalty can't be controlled. My 4 relationships taught me what love isn't: drama, ego, performance, bargaining. My 5th love, my husband, taught me what love is: steadiness, truth, patience, and the courage to grow. My children taught me that success means nothing if you're not present to witness their moments. My grandchildren taught me that kids don't need perfection, they need consistency. And my son's divorce taught me that families aren't saved by money alone, they're saved by compassion that stays when things get messy. The happiest ending isn't that I became rich, or that my house became peaceful, or that my grandchildren became better again. The happiest ending is that I finally became balanced. I finally learned to enjoy food without being owned by it. I learned to sleep enough without disappearing into it. I learned to earn money without worshiping it. I learned to keep blessings without hoarding them. I learned that enough is not a shortage, it's a victory. And I learned that real wealth is not what you store in cupboards or accounts, but what you build inside your character: patience, gratitude, moderation, and love. So, if you're listening to my story and you recognize yourself, if you grew up without enough and now you chase too much, please hear me clearly. You don't need to punish yourself. You need to understand yourself. The past can make you hungry, but you don't have to let hunger drive the steering wheel forever. Build your life like a home, not like a warehouse. Keep what you need, share what you can, and never forget that peace is the most expensive thing in the world. Because you can't buy it, you can only practice it. That is my lesson. That is my real happy ending. And that is the story of Isabella Marie, me. Thank you for listening to my story and for learning the lesson it carries. If this story touched you and you liked the video, please subscribe to the channel and stay connected for more true stories based on real life experiences.